Hey everyone, it is Kaylee from the future. I am just checking in before this video even starts to let you know that it is a pretty long video. And a lot of it is me explaining things and me showing you how I make art. If that interests you and you want to stick around, I appreciate it so much. But I encourage you to grab a snack, make yourself cozy, do all the things that you need to do to set the mood and to make this a cozy viewing experience. Like I said, it's a lot of me like going through my process. So I just want to make sure that you are comfy and prepared. So with that being said, let's jump into the actual video and I will see you in the next clip. Hey you guys, my name is Kaylee. Welcome to my channel. I am an artist, quilter, illustrator based in North Carolina, and I am so glad that you are here with me today. Thank you for joining me. I truly appreciate you being here, whether you are a previous viewer, a new viewer, anything in between. Like, it truly means the world to me. I mean it every time I say it. Thank you so much for being here. Typically, I make pretty consistent artist diary style vlogs where I just document what I'm working on, things that I'm doing in the art space or just in community space, things of that nature. Other niche hobbies that I'm interested in, I kind of do a little bit of it all. But today I wanted to make a more focused video on something that I've been getting a lot of questions on, not only in this YouTube space, but also in my personal life as well with other sewists and quilters. And that is how I piece my quilts together, because I've recently undertaken a new method of doing it, and it's like opened so many creative doors for me. Like, I just feel like this method really enables me to create the kind of quilts that I want to make. And a little bit of a disclaimer here, these are all hand pieced for the most part. I do use machine sometimes, but my method of quilting is not a traditional method of quilting. It's more of like an artistic, free-spirited style of quilting. And then also another disclaimer is that everything I have learned from this is not things that I created on my own. We're all learning from somebody somewhere doing something. I'm a firm believer that there are truly no original ideas. We're all just kind of bouncing things off of one another and learning from one another. And I don't want to gatekeep information either. So I'm making this video as kind of a reference point for just some tips and tricks on how I like to assemble my quilts together, because I've recently gotten some questions posed to me of like, how are you making that? And that is, to me, the greatest compliment ever, but I cannot take full credit for everything that I'm doing. I love researching quilting and how people are doing things. So a couple of my favorite resources are going to be listed below in the description box. The first one is Heidi Parks. She is a mentor, a teacher for me. I work with her fairly closely, and I actually got to take a class with her in person earlier this year, which is where I'm learning the majority of the methods that I'm using now. And even if you weren't able to attend this February class that has come and gone already, she does have a great resource on her website. She has a on-demand workshop. It's a scrap quilting workshop. I'm going to go ahead and link that specifically below. We did employ a lot of the methods used in there, and what I'm going to be showing today is just how I'm doing things. But if you want more specific techniques, things that I'm not doing that are really insightful, I will link that class below. I have recommended it to so many students of hers and just so many quilters and sewists that I know, because it is kind of the framework for the way I work now and how it's changed my process. That is my first resource I want to explain or let you know on. And the second one is another YouTube channel here. Her name is K3N Cloth Tales, and I'll go ahead and link her channel below as well. She does great handwork pieces. She does very in-depth, piece by piece working tutorials on her channel, and she's just a delight to listen to and to play while I'm working, play while I'm in the car, and I can just listen, all those things. So those are my two major resources that I would like to recommend to you. Again, this is not methods and techniques that I've solely come up with on my own. I am a student too, just as much as the next person. I love being a student, and I love learning from other people and other artists, other creators. It's just the greatest gift to be able to learn from one another, I think. With that all being said, the quilt that we are going to be piecing together in this video is my stream of consciousness type quilt. I believe I showed a little tidbit of it at the end of the last vlog where I was struggling with Bentley and showing the quilt off. I'll include a clip here of the last time I showed it on the internet. It looks a bit different from there now, but not too vastly different. So I'm in the middle of piecing this together, and I'm on a bit of a self-induced timeline for this because I am heading to Seattle in a couple of weeks, and I would love to have this quilt top all pieced together by then. So it's like one pieced square, and I can work on detail with embroidery, applique, those kinds of things while I'm on my trip and I'm traveling, flying, etc. That's kind of my tentative goal, and I think we can get there. I think we can get there, or at least get pretty close. And I also want to mention too that the first quilt that I really implemented this kind of processing or method on, I just finished a couple of days ago, which is really exciting, and I love how it turned out. So I'm gonna go outside and show you a clip of that at some point, but here is that footage so you can see the end result and just the kind of feel and energy of this kind of quilt working, what that kind of produces. Okay, let me go ahead and show you how this turned out. Can you see that okay? Maybe that's a little better. But yeah, this is it all said and done and finished. I am so happy with how this came out. And then this is the back. Ignore this string at the top. I was just using that to make a reel. I just need to add a sleeve to it, and then it will be ready to hang. All right, and before we actually get started with assembling the quilt together, I thought it might be helpful to have a visual as to where we are starting with this piece and have something to compare it to at the end. I feel like a lot of creative people are pretty visual, so I thought I would upload this onto my iPad and we could do a little visual video right next to me as I'm kind of explaining the things I see for this quilt top before I end up actually putting any stitches down. I generally have a couple of ideas of how my quilt top will look, or the parts of the quilt that I want to incorporate into a specific piece ahead of time. And I'm always thinking about different things to add to the quilt. And what's really nice about this method in particular is that I can make a bunch of small pieces for the quilt top and have them just sitting on the side and not know exactly where they're going to go yet, but know that they're going to go on the quilt top. So for example, on my desk behind me, I have a stack of different elements of the quilt that I've made, and they don't have a home on the quilt top yet, but that's okay. There's like no rush to this process because I know they will go there eventually, and sometimes they might not. So there's not really a sense of urgency with these ideas. They can move and, you know, be changed in the future. And I quite enjoy that, and it does make working on the quilt on the go a bit easier as well, as I'm not transporting a giant whole cloth, but just pieces of the quilt as a whole, if that makes sense. So I've uploaded pictures of my quilt top into Procreate, and I'm going to visually show you what's going on here. So this is where my quilt top is currently at. This is what it looks like. This is me holding it up outside, and you can see we have this L-shaped piece here, and we just basically need to fill in all of this information to complete the square of the quilt top. It's about 5'2" by each side. This is the biggest quilt top I've ever made, and it's been a fun project to kind of navigate and figure out. So if we open up this here, you can see all of these images that I've inserted on the right-hand side, and these are pieces of my quilt top that I've already made and are waiting to be added to the quilt. These are just some of the things that I've made in the past couple of weeks. I can always add, edit, remove anything as I see fit, and if there's another idea that comes along later and I can add it to the quilt top, that's also great. This is what we're working with now, and the first piece of this quilt top that I ever made was actually these horses here. Let me just get rid of this. These horses were the first thing I made for this quilt top, and it was the first thing I embroidered. I knew I wanted horses on the quilt top. It's the year of the horse. I really love animal energy, and it's something that, like I keep saying, I knew I would incorporate somehow, some way, even if I didn't know where it was going to go. But luckily, I always saw this part of the quilt in the lower right-hand corner. And when I work, I have found that I typically work in this upper left-hand corner and this lower left-hand corner first, and then I move this way to the right, and then I leave this for last. That is kind of the method that it seems to happen. So it's funny that I created the first part of the quilt in the last spot that I usually work on when assembling a quilt top together, but that is no problem with this method, as I'm able just to piece it in whenever it's ready to be on the quilt top. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to resize this, and this is all estimated. I don't know how big this actually is in comparison to everything else. It's just kind of a lucky guess, but I'm going to assume that it's probably about, it's probably a little bit bigger. Maybe like yay big, probably like yay big. I'll move it up a little bit because this here is going to be our bottom edge of the quilt. And so I kind of want this to look as, you know, even as possible. So we can put that guy there. That's where he's going to live. But as you can see now, that eats up a lot of our negative space that we have. So I have kind of some stuff in here, and then I have some stuff here. This is kind of a fun shape if you think about it like that. And then something needs to go behind these flying geese up here as well to connect the flying geese to this block here. So that's something to think about. You can kind of see how it's being puzzled together. Another thing that I for sure want to put on this quilt top is this nameplate of Zippy that I did. This is something that I stitched when we let Zippy go and said our final goodbyes to her, and we were going down the mountain and I was having a really hard time, but I stitched this for her. And this is a pretty small piece, but something I know would be really important to me to include on this quilt. So I really don't know where this is going to go. I've thought about doing it as an applique, just like on a piece like this. I've thought about moving it into the quilt top as a piece that like holds the structure together. I'm really not sure. Right now, I'm kind of in this space where I think it might not look nice as an applique just on this blank piece of fabric, less as a piece that holds the structure together and just more of like an applique piece, if that makes sense. So I think I'm going to put that there for now. I do quite like how that looks, and I do have an idea for another applique piece to kind of go in this section here. It's going to be my hand, so that's going to kind of go there. I've already kind of thought that one through in that way, but we'll get rid of it for now just so we're not looking at a bunch of red lines. And then I have this piece of scrap material that I found in my stash. I'm going to show you how I'm organizing my fabric at the moment for this quilt top because I've done some rearranging back here. But I have a bag of scraps essentially, and this piece is in there, and I love the shape of it. And I already kind of think it's going to go in this spot next to Hildegard von Bingen. It's quite a bit smaller. So it's maybe like yay big. So I kind of thought about that going here. I love this chartreuse color that's throughout the quilt, and the scrap just seems to be calling to be a frame on an already existing piece. And then we have some fun little pieced together pieces. I have both of these like kind of like cross looking things. This was something that I saw on Pinterest. If you are not already, you need to be on Pinterest because I look at Pinterest like it is my morning newspaper every morning. I find so much inspiration there, and if you're an artist, like, you need to be on Pinterest looking at visuals and references. So I kind of saw these like appliqued pieced together pieces. I'm not sure if they're appliqued on or if they're pieced, but I just appliqued these little squares onto a pre-existing square, and it kind of creates this like little cross shape that I think is pretty interesting. So I made a few of these. I actually have one more, and they're pretty small, but I kind of saw them in this general area of the quilt. This spot I have not really given much thought to, this negative space in the middle, so I'm not sure if I would like piece these together or if I would put a larger piece underneath and then applique these on top. I really don't know yet, and that's kind of the fun part of this, is I don't have to necessarily worry about that yet. I can just kind of figure it out later. But as long as I have a general idea as to where they're going to go, that is enough for me at this time. So I can kind of just like plop them here. And then these are the other small squares that I pieced together just with some scraps that I had. And again, not really sure where they're going to go. I love the pink and kind of grid of each of these, so they could exist together. They're pretty small as well. Like, they could exist living next to one another, but they could also exist separately and be moved, you know, in this area down here I don't really know yet. And then last but not least, I have these two checkered pieces. All right, I apologize, it's getting a little crowded here, but I have these two checkerboard pieces, and this originally I planned to put up here in this corner at the very beginning when I was piecing this together, piecing this upper left corner, but I decided not to do that and kind of scratch the idea entirely. So now I have these two free-floating checkerboard forms. Hi Gary, how's it going, buddy? But yes, these exist as two free-floating checkerboard forms. I'm not 100% committed to keeping them on this quilt top. I think if they end up making it on the quilt, great. If they end up being moved to a different quilt top later on, I think that's also just fine. I love checkerboard, I love grid, so if I don't use them now, I will definitely use them later. Yeah, I mean, these can be placed pretty much anywhere. They can be turned this, like, you know, vertically instead of horizontally. The options are pretty endless. They can be applique on later. That could always be an option. That would be kind of cool if it was like up here maybe. I really don't know. This is all going to be pretty filled up. Like even here, that would be pretty cool. It might be applique on later, you know, so like, as you can tell, I'm like figuring this out with you as we go, and having a visual like this really helps me organize my thoughts and organize where things are going to go. It helps me move forward. It helps me kind of like make a decision and know the next right thing to do. So that's kind of my thought process with this. And one last thing I wanted to mention too, actually, is I don't have a picture of it, but I want to include this white grid fabric down here to kind of connect this left corner to this right corner. That's always been a plan, as I want like a long bar of this white fabric. That is the direction for things at the moment. That's the method to the madness. That is what I'm thinking. And if you haven't tried this with your own quilt tops, I would strongly encourage you to. I took pictures of all the quilt pieces on my phone. I uploaded them to an app called PixArt. I removed the backgrounds, and then I imported them into my iPad to be able to look at it in such a way. So I find this to be super helpful, and hopefully it was helpful for you to kind of see what I'm thinking about and hopefully be able to tag along for my thought process. And like I keep saying, this is all subject to change. Like who knows what this will look like at the end. But just as a frame of reference, I think this would be a pretty fun screenshot to grab to look at later when this is all finished, just to see how things ended up in the end. So now that all of that housekeeping is kind of out of the way and discussed, I think we can go ahead and start working on these plans that we have. And the first thing I'm going to start with is those horses, because it is about time that they finally get on this quilt top. And I actually started piecing some of it yesterday to just kind of get some thoughts out on fabric. So let's go ahead and pull that up and I will show you what I'm doing. Excuse this not being able to fit on this tabletop space here, but these are the horses, and this is what they look like in their current state. They have not changed for weeks, but I did go ahead and stitch this first row of flying geese onto this yesterday. As you can see, it is just stitched onto this piece of fabric with a little ladder stitch, and these existed in outer space on their own, but their plan was always to be associated with these horses because I'm trying to create some direction of movement, like forward momentum with these flying geese. And the other row is up here, and this is just pinned at the current moment. So first things first is I'm going to go ahead and stitch this on, and then we can go ahead and kind of configure this piece and assess how we are going to attach it to the larger overarching quilt top. I apologize in advance with the switch up of all the angles. I don't have a ton of actual tabletop space to work, And to be honest, I work a lot on the floor, so this is just a very natural position and backdrop for me when I'm working. But this is the result of our flying geese being attached to our horses here. And you can see that these edges obviously don't line up, but that is okay because we're piecing this together. So there will be something that will probably go under this over here and then over this edge over here to, you know, seamlessly connect everything together. It's not something that we need to worry about with this method. But before we address this side and attaching this part of the quilt going up this way, I want to look at this bottom corner here, as this is going to be the bottom of the quilt. And one thing I wanted to make a special note of is that I did not want the binding to cover up the flying geese. So I actually moved them up a little bit so the bottom edge here is not in line with the bottom edge here. So to remedy this situation, we need to attach a piece of fabric to the bottom edge here to make it one seamless level line, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So likely something will go underneath here to kind of bump this edge out a little bit and make it so our binding in the future doesn't cover up these flying geese, because I feel like it would look a little odd if the binding came up and covered like this much of this quilt block, for example, like it would cut them off. So now I need to go to my materials shelf to pull some pieces that would possibly remedy this problem. And as I mentioned earlier, I recently reconfigured this shelf of my bookcase back here. This used to house all of my antique dolls. They've since moved to above my desk, and that's a much better place for them. My working materials of fabric that I had before, the method for it was just having piles of fabric on the floor, and I could constantly see it in the background of my videos, and it drove me crazy. So we had to reconfigure things a little bit, and this works much better for me because I'm the kind of person that needs to be able to see things to remember that I have them, or to remember that they're there. Gosh. So this is our palette of fabrics that we are working with, and I've organized them by color family for the most part. So I have like our chartreuses and our greens, our whites, beiges, blacks, and grid patterns here. And then this is our pinks, and I have some brown tweed pants here that I'm pulling from as well. And then this bag here is just our little scrap bag of everything that we've worked on so far. If I have little bits and bobs, I throw them in here to pull from later if I need like a tiny little piece of fabric to fill in a corner or fill in an edge. As a reminder, to fill in that lower portion of the horses that we are working on, I need to have something that's long and slim to piece that together. And I'm actually going to pull my horses here and lay them next to me so I can kind of eyeball if something will work or not. I know I recently put some long strips of fabric from my scrap quilt that I just finished. The back piece of it was a non-bleached linen because it's really affordable, it's really easy to work with, and I had some outer perimeter edges that I needed to cut off to trim it to size. And I just threw them on the shelf because I was like, hey, this kind of works in the color family of the quilt that I'm working on currently, so maybe I can use this in the future. So I have several strips here of different sizes. So I know that I can use these, and I did also pull another strip of fabric too. It's a little bit thicker, it's a little bit denser. I think this is like a linen cotton blend. And they are two different whites. They do make a difference, if you can tell. I'm not sure. But if we're looking at these, I'm kind of just placing them my line of sight here and trying to decide if this is something that will work. And if it doesn't work, that's totally fine. I'm just seeing what options I have and what I can work with. So I honestly think that, oh, is this a strip too? This is a strip too. Wonderful. So this is all just on this top layer here, and I've not even gone into this scrap bag. So save every scrap you have because you never know what you will end up using them for. So now with these pieces in mind, I'm just gonna like work down here and kind of roughly assemble something that would work, and then I will get back to you in a minute here. You really have to trust the process here, but this is what I'm thinking. To make this all one even edge here, I've kind of placed these two white and off-white fabrics that we discussed earlier, and then this green strip that I found. I love this fabric so much, so I love the idea of incorporating it somewhere else in the quilt too, just aside from those two big blocks, just so it's kind of a reoccurring piece that we're working with and seeing on the quilt top. But what I plan to do here is I'm going to attach these two pieces together, fold the edges under to kind of create this diagonal seam that we see here. That's happening because I think that's pretty interesting, but I don't typically work with raw edge a lot. That's something I'm trying to work through and incorporate more into my work, but until then, I think it would be kind of interesting to have this like diagonal line here, because this line is diagonal, but this one here is pretty straight. So I think that would be a cool effect to have. And then this piece I'm going to incorporate underneath the flying geese, and I will probably end it right here and have this piece come on top of it, and then this piece on top of these, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain. You just have to go ahead and jigsaw them together, but that's what I'm thinking for this. I think that would be a pretty cool effect and just add a little bit more visual interest onto the bottom instead of it being just a black line. And then keep in mind too that a majority of this information here will be covered up by the binding when the quilt is almost finished. So this is just a small detail. It's maybe not the most time efficient process or method of doing it, but for these little finicky areas, I think it's worth it to spend a little bit of extra time to make sure that things sit and look how you want them to look. So now what I'm gonna go do is I'm gonna trim this bit off here so these two pieces can fasten together. I'm gonna iron the edges under here, and then I'm going to take this piece and iron all the edges under as well. And I'm going to keep as much of this like kind of raggedy information that I see in the variation of the line as I can by doing little cuts vertically all around the whole piece, just to kind of preserve some of those little nuances and to make it look more scrappy as opposed to a rectangle that, you know, maybe was intentionally cut perfectly. Like, I don't want that effect. I love these like wobbly lines and imperfect edges and corners, but I like them to be tucked in and tucked under so I don't have to worry about things fraying beyond my control. So that is the method for this madness. I will touch base with you later on once I am working with this and kind of fastening things together. I imagine it'll be a couple hours into the evening by the time I touch base with you again. Okay, everyone, it has been a couple hours as promised. It is now the evening time. This is where we're at. So what I went ahead and did, like I said, is I attached these two different white pieces together. I put this green part, tucked the edges under with an iron, and went ahead and sewed that down. And then I went underneath all of that with the two white pieces and did a little running stitch from here all the way along over here. And then I still have a bit of tail left from that cotton muslin that I'm not cutting off yet because I don't really know how I want to finish this edge down here once it connects to the rest of the quilt top. But that is what things are looking like. So the bottom edge of the lower right hand corner of our quilt has been established, and I think this will give enough room for the binding. Let's assume our binding is like 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. It'll come up just a little bit and you'll still have this little peekaboo between. So all in all, this did not take me very long. I think I was thinking it would take me longer than it did. But I mean, once I ironed everything down, this maybe took like 30 minutes tops to do. So I think it is a worthy detail. And now I have this like solid edge down here and it is pretty even. If I need to even it up even more later on, I can just trim away at this extra information here just to make sure it's, you know, as straight of a line as I want. But like I said, I do like things to be a little wobbly. And I also just really love, let me see if I can zoom in for you. I also love these little intersections that happen. So there's like a seam right here, which I think is probably a little blown out. You can't see it. And then like, you know, these intersections here, this intersection here, and then this is Just all lovely little things that I like to look at when I am working, because chances are when it's all assembled together later on, you know, I won't have such a microscopic view into the quilt top as I do at this very moment, which I think is kind of special. So now that that is done, I think we should get on the floor again and lay this quilt top out and look at this lower corner section, kind of like macro view, because we're very micro view at the moment. Let's go macro and see what things are looking like, how we think we want to attach it to the quilt top overall, and tend to like to do is fasten all the edges together and then work on the inside out. That's kind of how the last quilt went, and it was fine. It worked out really well for me. So I think that's probably what we're gonna end up doing here. But let's go ahead and hop on the floor. Also, the angles and lighting for this video is gonna be so not aesthetic, because as soon as the sun goes down, it gets really dark in here. And I do a majority of my sewing at night or in the evening. So it's just the reality of things and how my schedule works at the moment. We're not going to be fully able to spread this quilt top out, obviously, because my studio room is pretty cozy. But I think we can get a general idea. And you can probably tell by this method how it is impossible for me to get perfectly straight edges. All right, so we have our edge here kind of established and laid down, and then we have this side established and laid down as well. So now we can kind of fit this piece in where it lines up with this edge down here. You can see all that. And then where it aligns up with this edge over here. It's like barely in frame, but I'll probably pull that up a little bit, which means this needs to come up a little bit just to lay everything as flat as possible. With this, you can get a general idea of what we all need to fill in. We have this information over here that needs to be filled in, this information here that needs to be filled in, and then this down here that needs to be filled in. And now what we want to think about is how we want to attach these flying geese to this panel here, and then this information over this way. So if you remember when we were on my iPad, I mentioned that I wanted to put a white block of that grid linen over here. So that would be a pretty easy adjustment. And then this as well is a pretty narrow negative space, so it would be pretty straightforward for me to attach something here to connect these pieces. So I kind of want to decide what I want to do first, and I'm going to take a minute to think about that and catch my breath, and I'll come back to you when we have a game plan. I am back. That actually didn't take too much brainstorming to figure out how I wanted to proceed with this, but what I ended up doing is I took a piece of pink linen cotton blend, but it's a pink mauve-y color, and I'm actually going to put this underneath all of the layers here, tuck these edges under, and kind of just like applique them onto this piece. I think that would create a fun layering effect. And I'm going to use a ladder stitch as to kind of hide the seams of it so it looks very flat and very uniform. And also, this is a great time to mention you having a small iron here. And this just makes things so much easier as far as ironing edges under on the go on a surface such as a floor. I wouldn't recommend using this iron straight on fabric with a carpet underneath, but do it at your own risk, I suppose. That's what I'm gonna do. I wouldn't recommend it, but it is what's gonna be done. And also, I feel like it's important to mention that once I get these edges folded under and everything pinned in place, I'm gonna pick this whole thing up and stitch it, so I don't break my back as I'm hunched over a quilt top on the floor. It's all about good ergonomics at the end of the day. I cannot stress that enough. So once everything is ironed and tucked under, then we'll pick it up, sew it together, and then I'll come back perhaps to address this situation over here. Now that we have this all ironed under and pinned in place, I can go ahead and sew all these edges down. As you can see, we kind of have like new shapes coming forward here. Excuse the kitties, it's time to snuggle, as you can tell. We're having new shapes that we're making that we're having to fill, but I really don't stress about it. I will solve that problem when we get to it. But for now, I'm just looking kind of like at what's right in front of me and working from there. Like I said, oh. What do you think, Ledgy? Do you like the quilt top so far? But anyway, like I was saying, I'm gonna go ahead and pull this up off the floor and stitch these pieces down. So now we are connected to this right side of the quilt top. But yeah, that's the plan. So now these horses will officially be connected to the overall quilt top, which is really, really exciting, finally. I'm looking more and more disheveled as time goes on, so I think it is time to call it an evening. I just finished stitching this all together, so hopefully you can kind of see that she's fastened. She's fastened to the quilt top officially. And you might ask or ponder what I do with this extra fabric on the back here. I don't think I mentioned it, but this mauvey pink scrap was just a scrap that I pulled, that I had on my shelf there. Basically what I'll do is all of this free floating stuff, I will just trim that off and hopefully get to use this part of fabric somewhere else in the quilt top. It's like a no waste method of sewing. And if I don't use it in this quilt top, I'll probably use it in a future one very soon. Cause like I said, I'm obsessed with this Essex cotton linen. So that is where we are at. I ended up taking a photo of that lower left-hand corner where that negative space is because I didn't assume that I would get to that this evening. It is 8 p.m., which means it's almost my bedtime. It's time to like get ready for bed for me. So I did not think I would get that far, but I won't be able to sew for a couple of days. So I wanted to make sure I took a photo that I could stare at and kind of brainstorm and figure out in passing. So I hopefully have a plan of action when I'm ready to sit down and sew again. That was, I think, a really productive day and evening. I hope that all this footage is able to be edited into something that sort of makes sense eventually. It's hard to explain your process in general, but like transforming it into like a video that you're able to understand is kind of like a whole other element to it. Yeah, that is what I know for now. Like I said, I probably won't sew for a couple of days, so my plan is to just check in as I'm working throughout the week, and it'll be more of a vibe like this because, like I said, I usually sew in the evenings and at nighttime most often. The only time I'm not doing that is during the weekend. For the week, you will see me in a state of cozy, comfy sewing type vibe. So I hope that's okay with you. It's definitely okay with me. And I will see you in a couple of days. Hello. It has been a couple days, almost a week, honestly, and it's been a really busy week. It's been a really busy year. I keep saying that in my videos, but we are back, and I'm ready to do some work on this quilt throughout the weekend here. We're about 7 days until I need to leave on my trip, but I think that's more than plenty of time to get this all finished and pieced together. So while I have not been checking in with you, I have been doing a little bit of work and piecing and brainstorming. So let me show you what I am currently thinking and the direction that our quilt top is going to go in for its final finish, its home stretch. And I just want to note too that the quilt top, once I get all of this filled in, is not going to be finished. I'm going to do more embroidery and applique and stuff on top of it. This is just to make it one cohesive piece. I've been editing this video and I don't know if I've mentioned that. I don't recall mentioning that. So this is not going to be the finished product, but it's already looking really great. And it could be the finished product, I suppose, but I am a maximalist through and through, so just keep that in mind. But yeah, let me show you what I've done and what I'm planning to do. Okay, where I believe we left off is this section here, which is our pink little moment. And since then, I have built out and kind of configured how I want everything else to look. I also went in and attached this block here, this pink bit here. This was a piece of scrap that came from this section over here that we did. I attached this piece, which we had discussed in our initial plans and brainstorming session in the beginning of the video. I attached this piece. So these ones here are all on the quilt, and we just have a bunch of free-floating pieces here. So not really sure where we're gonna fill things in here beyond this. Like, you obviously can see some negative space here and here, but this is what I'm thinking. And this is using all of the pieces that we described in the beginning of the video, and then also a couple of other ones too that I found in my scrap bin. You can see that that piece up there I plan to applique. That one's gonna go into this little block here. This needs to be attached to this somehow. That's kind of where things are at. I also mentioned that I wanted to put some grid white fabric in this section, so this is staying open at the moment, but it does have a plan. There is a plan for this. Something's gonna go there. I know something's gonna go there. I just haven't cut out the piece of fabric yet, and I don't think it's necessary that I put it in at this exact moment. I kind of want it to be probably one of the last steps. So that's how things are looking. And if we step back and kind of get like an overall picture, really excuse the outer perimeter mess here. It's just the reality of working in a cozy space. But I think this looks really balanced. It looks really interesting. Like, you have some areas of like larger blank spaces, and then you have some areas of more condensed patchwork, those kinds of things. So I think it's looking good, and I'm excited to move forward. I have brainstormed with all these little pieces in several different configurations in several different ways, and this is ultimately my favorite outcome of them. And I also want to say too that the only piece of scrap that I'm not using is this larger checkerboard piece, and that can always be used in a future quilt because it's very universal and can kind of work with anything. Yeah, that is what things are looking like. So basically what I will do next here is I will probably go into this area. And my first priorities here will be to attach these two pieces to each other, and then attach this piece to these two pieces after that. So I'm going to be doing a series of ironing things under, stitching them together, and I will attach these three to this piece. So it's a lot of kind of going back and forth between the iron and fiddling with sewing and et cetera, but that's kind of where I plan to go. I'd like to attach this to this horse piece, and then I think I'll move up into this section, and then probably move into this section after that, because that is the least amount of work and the least amount of planning that I've done so far, as like, or what's left that needs to be done. But yeah, that is what I know, and I'm really happy with how it's looking. I'm really excited. This is the part where I can kind of see like the end of the finish line, and I'm looking forward to being able to work on this weekend. I don't have much planned, honestly, so it's the perfect time to knock this out, get it finished, so I can move on to the next step before it's actually finished. And also, like, my studio is just like the center of the studio is completely bare, so I can lay this out. So it'll be nice to be able to put things back in their rightful place. And yeah, I'm just feeling really good. So let's go ahead and get started with these little pieces here first. A little bit of time has passed. More time than I would like to admit. I entered a bit of a flow state. Sorry, the lighting in here is so black. It has been a rainy week here, so it's dark in here, so I have the big lights on. Headphones are off, so I feel like I can think a little better. I got some piecing done, and I know this is not as... Today has not been as detailed as I was the other day, but I feel like once you see me do it once, you can figure out how I'm doing it every time. It's just like kind of troubleshooting and problem solving on the go. It really is that. So I wanted to make sure that I gave you a little update on how things are going. Okay, so these pieces are officially attached. These were sewn together and then placed underneath everything, and you can see where I've folded edges over, and I love these like little wobbly lines here. So all we have left is this little space here. This I plan to put in that area, and here I do not know what's gonna go here yet. We will figure it out as we go. But one thing that I'm noticing now that I might have to do is I turned this edge under and sewed it down, which is totally fine and the right thing to do in most cases. But now I'm realizing that I want to wiggle this little shape underneath this piece of fabric so I don't have to tuck all these edges under. So what I'm going to have to do here is I'm going to have to unpick a couple of my seams just so I can fit this underneath, which not a huge deal, but just something along the way that I'm noticing that I needed to troubleshoot, and I missed that I wanted to do that. Like I forgot I wanted to have this underneath. So I just went ahead and stitched this all the way down when I shouldn't have done that. So that's one thing. But yeah, after this is placed, really only have that little spot. This spot is still an open rectangle. I have that piece pinned, safety pinned, and then this I imagine will go here. What's going in this space, don't know yet, but we will figure it out eventually. And then what's really exciting is I stitched these, all three of these together like I told you I would. They're all stitched together, and then I fasten them on so they are attached, fully attached, which is really nice. I love how flat it is. I love the shapes. I love the linear qualities. I love everything about it. And then what I went ahead and did is I tucked the raw edges of this piece and this piece under, so it creates this kind of like cool negative space. What I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a piece of muslin and just put it underneath everything like so. I'll need a bigger piece of muslin, clearly. Big piece of muslin underneath, and then I'll stitch all these edges down so that spot is completely filled, which I think looks good. I like this like pop of like cream amongst all these shapes and these intersections here. So that is what I am thinking of doing next, and then I'll probably be done for the evening and get back at it tomorrow. But that is the plan for the rest of the afternoon, and then I'm going to call it a day after that. I feel like I've exerted enough brain power and problem solving for an afternoon, and we will pick this back up tomorrow. Hey everybody, I am checking in on a Sunday. Good morning, or wait, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I think we are good to finish this quilt top today. Well, like not finish it, of course, but like finish piecing it together so it's one solid quilt top. I think we can do it this afternoon. I am just sitting down because I'm about to attend my quilt making class. We meet about once a month, and it's all virtual, so it's online, and we are encouraged to work on our work while we are in attendance of class. So I think while I'm sitting in class for these 3 hours, we can totally knock this out. Let me update you on where we last left off. Okay, so I ended up filling in this little spot here with the bigger checkerboard pieces. I love how that ended up turning out. I think it looks great. And just to put like a visual, I'll put it here. These are the two sections that we need to finish and need to put in. We know that the lower part is going to be that white linen grid fabric. It's not going to be anything pieced together that I can think of that is necessary, but we will add that on, I think probably last. And then in that small little central square that's empty, I have this piece that's going to go in there, and then I'm not really sure what else is happening with that. It's just going to be something that's pieced together. But with that all being said, let's go ahead and jump into the last bits and pieces of this quilt top while I attend my class. Not quite coming together, but in the same way. But It has been several hours. I have been piecing things together and trying things out, and you saw me working a little bit during class, and I was just like piecing my scraps together and nothing was really working in the space, in that negative space. So I decided not to push it and to just put in one piece of blank fabric, and I'm so happy that I did that and didn't like make something fit that didn't feel right, you know. So I went ahead and added that in. Let me go ahead and show you. So yes, originally I was attempting to do some sort of patchwork in this spot here, but I just decided to add my cream beige fabric and it works just fine. I think it looks really great with like the continuity of these lines kind of going up. It tricks the brain into thinking that it's like one pieced section instead of being something that I puzzle pieced together one by one. So I really am just happy that that I came to that conclusion and I didn't push myself about it. And again, I really do like how that looks. And then lastly, this is our remaining empty space. So obviously I'll trim this like extra information away. I just wasn't sure how big to make my piece of fabric for this space. It's always kind of hard for me to visually guess. But where you see all these pins here is where I need to sew and tack things down. So I plan to do that this evening. I'm a little sewed out at the moment from doing all that trial and error and talking about sewing for the last several hours. So I am ready to take a little break, walk away from it for a second, and then come back and tack all this down this evening. But you can see I'm basically just tucking edges under. So this was a raw edge that I tucked under. This was a raw edge that I tucked under. And then up here, this is the raw edge from the white grid that I tucked under. So there's some fun like layering happening. It really is a choose your own adventure style of quilt making. And I hope between the detailed bits and the not so detailed bits, you're able to kind of get that idea, because I mean, it is just like everything is just patchwork together the easiest way that it can be in that moment. When you do that, you come up with these really interesting little intersections and moments like I talked about earlier this week. It's not everyone's jam, perhaps, but it is certainly my jam, and I assume if you're watching this, it might be your jam as well. I'm going to finish this, like I said, tonight, and then we'll check back in tomorrow when all these pins are removed and we can see the finished product. Okay, who's ready for the big reveal? Look at this like big piece of fabric. This is so cool. Usually my quilts, like my quilt tops, are half the size of this. This is really exciting. I don't have like a magical way to reveal it, so here we go. This is her. I hope you can see all of it. I think we can see. I'm gonna stand on my tiptoes for you. I'm so happy with it. Yay! Alrighty everyone, that is it for me. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. I know this is a long one. I have not finished editing the video yet, and I'm already at like 30 some minutes, and I'm still on the first day of filming. So I know it's a long one. I really appreciate it. It means more than I can even express to know that people are interested in this style of quilt making, just because it's opened so many doors for me. Like I would love to even be like a inspiration for someone to find this creative expression. Like that would just mean the world to me. So thank you so much for watching this like puzzle piecing type of quilt making. More regularly scheduled content in the next video. By the time you're seeing this, I will be in Seattle, Washington, and I will be visiting my friend Sarah, and I think we're gonna have a really great time, and I plan to make a travel vlog, not only including clips from the travel and the sites we're seeing and the things that we're doing, but also the quilting and sewing that I will continue to do on this quilt top, because like I said, it is not finished yet, but it is a structured full square quilt top, which is really exciting and makes it easy to travel with. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next vlog. Until I see you again, I hope you are taking care of yourself wherever that you are and taking care of those around you. But yes, I will see you very, very soon. Take care. Bye.